In just a few moments, FEMA drops claims from millions of dollars in so-called clawback claims from Superstorm Sandy victims. What does it mean, though, for the remaining claims? But we begin this morning with the so-called victory of Common Core opponents, a coalition of teachers, parents, and some elected officials who led the extraordinary opt-out movement that, while centered on Long Island, spread upstate and then even into the city. TV 1055's Bauman explains what led so many parents to protest the tougher academic standards once again this year.
Well, you don't typically hear parents telling kids not to do their work, but those are the orders from these Washington Heights moms, saying they'd rather kids answer no question on the Common Core tests than answer some questions correctly.
Well, they're going to happen, they're going to fail, and it's going to be worse.
And they're not alone. In New York State last year, 20% of the students who were supposed to take the Common Core tests opted out. Families say schools teach the test rather than to the child.
The test is not to improve the students. I think the school is supposed to work with the student during the whole year.
This year, tests will have fewer questions and there are no time limits. Common Core proponents say handing students this exam isn't asking much.
I think being able to sit through a test that has removed all the impediments, it's not timed, it's not anything that's going to make children frantic. It really says to the student, the work that you learned, you're now accountable for.
Now, Chancellor Farina says that the changes to the test this year should fix some of the problems that parents were concerned with in previous years. But some families tell me that it's not about fixing the test, it's about getting rid of it and changing over to a portfolio system instead. A portfolio system that shows work throughout the year instead of a Common Core's 2-week testing. Darrell Bradford with New York Campaign for Achievement Now says if we can't measure how much students are learning in a standard way, there's no way to make learning opportunities equal across schools.
Testing gave us the knowledge we needed. It gave us the proof we needed to make changes for kids who needed the most and who had the least ability to make them on their own.
But for some parents, the needed change is the standardized testing process.
And joining us now is Long Island's representative on the State Board of Regents, Roger Tillis, and welcome to the show. And as you know, 55% of Long Island students opted out. So what do you think? Have Common Core opponents won?
Well, it depends on what you consider Common Core. Common Core is a set of standards, period. That's all it is. And most educators, parents, and others think that the Common Core standards being raised were fine. Nobody was against raising the standards. It was how it was implemented, with the assessment being a very invalid, I think, kind of measure. The assessment was then used to evaluate teachers, which I've always thought was unfair. I wrote Newsday a piece 6 years ago against that. And now the government is coming along.
You're right. The state seems like every day someone from the state backing off daily from it. You have the new chancellor, the new education commissioner, both being openly critical of how the system was rolled out, as you said, and even sympathetic to the parents who were so fiercely opposed to it, promising to do better. But still, the opponents want this system completely trashed. Is that likely?
I don't know. The Assembly is working on trying to get rid of the one section that is still left, which is really not really going to be used for the next 3 years. We have a moratorium on the use of the state tests for evaluation, and that's
being used for evaluating teachers for at least several more years. Been put off,
and therefore, if we can start afresh, because the regents will be proposing a new evaluation system. They will be proposing new assessments, and they've already are changing the standards to reflect whatever changes need to be made, and the curriculum is now going to be done in the local districts by collaborating teachers, which it was not done except in a few districts.
Well, that's why Common Core opponents are calling it a wholesale retreat. I mean, even somewhat equally remarkable, we saw the Gates Foundation come out and apologize for the problems with the Common Core rollout, because their charitable foundation was helping to pay for the startup of the tougher educational regimen that was put into place here and elsewhere in the country. So who's left in favor of the current system now? Just the governor?
I don't know exactly who's left, but there are pressures coming on the governor and the Senate to keep what's the remnants of the system that are there. Some of us don't see the purpose of doing that. And as far as the regents are concerned, we're moving ahead as if that section doesn't exist. It affects local districts, though. They could lose their state aid if they don't continue working with it.
You know, because when there was a backlash against the governor on this, then he said, well, you know, it is the education department and the regents and all of those folks who do this anyway. So is he kind of out of the picture?
Look, the regents have always been the education policymakers of the state until 5 years ago, when the governor and the legislature basically took over that with the rollout of the Common Core, the evaluation, the assessment, etc., all in the legislation. We had to go along with that. I think they have backed off. They're trying to insert themselves into that. And
you're not hearing many public comments these days.
No.
Now, will we see a change in approach? Because this is a big election year. We're going to have a new president. Will we see a change in approach on this here and nationally, depending on who wins the White House?
I don't think so. I think that I mean, Donald Trump has said, let's get rid of the Common Core. I'm sure he doesn't understand the difference between the standards and the rollout of the Common Core, because that's what's the real problem, is the rollout, not the standard.
Because these standards, these tests and the questions are not being thrown out. They're just being evaluated, right?
The tests are still being used,
right.
And but they won't be at high stakes for the teachers anymore. And once the teachers don't have the high stakes, they should be able to not teach to the test, not have some of the problems that have come up.
Now, we've had out there for some time this idea that the federal government could penalize the state if it now suddenly tries to back away from implementing the Common Core regimen. Yeah. Is that so?
The new regulations, which are still out there for comment, are saying that if a district doesn't have 95% of their students taking the test, the 3 through 8 tests, that the district could lose all the federal money that it gets.
And we had only 80% last year.
Well, no, in Long Island, there would probably be no district on Long Island that would qualify for any federal money.
Oh, right, because it would go district by district.
Because we lost 55% of our of students last year.
Well, a long summer ahead, and assured to be more developments on this front. Roger Tillis, Long Island's representative on the New York State Board of Regents. Thanks for explaining where things stand with Common Core. As I said, plenty more sure to be ahead. Thank you, sir. And